And we're live. Hello. Welcome to Story Strategy Live. This is episode 23, Exploring Dark Romance. And we have a special guest today, bestselling author Eva Charles. Hi, Eva.
Hello. How
Hello.
are
you? So I forgot to put the music slide up today, guys. I'm sorry, Eva, that you didn't get to dance to our fun little jingle.
It's very peppy.
Next time.
It is peppy. Next time. Well, anyway, we're going to talk about a few different things today, mostly dark romance. And I think we're going to get into sort of what is it? Because it seems that maybe we don't all agree.
I think that's true.
Okay. But first, Dawn has on our notes that I'm going to tell a funny story. So
no pressure.
No pressure. Hi, Julie. Well, it's actually not funny. I have a story. It's kind of funny, but it's one of those like life lesson things. So my now 13-year-old son had a birthday recently, and he got a whole bunch of money from relatives because we gave him a checking account basically and a debit card and said, okay, so now you can manage this. And of course, the first thing he did was figure out how much he had and then find the thing that cost exactly that amount of money. And he ended up, my relatives were too generous, I think. And so he ended up with more than we certainly intended. And he ordered himself an Oculus Rift, a little VR gaming headset.
Wow.
Which is, I mean, that's a lot of money for me to spend. So I was kind of like, okay. So he orders this thing and then he like religiously tracks it on his cell phone. When is it coming? When is it coming? He sees that the truck is like en route and then it's been delivered, only it's not here. And so he's like out in the front yard, like what, looking through bushes. I'm like, honey, they don't like bury it. It would be on the porch. And he's like, but it says it's delivered and it's not delivered. And I'm like, let's just wait until the end of the day. Maybe the guy marked it ahead of time or something. No, so it didn't come. So we call UPS and they say, oh no, we delivered it. And he's like, but I don't have it. And I get on the phone. I'm like, I think you need to understand what's going on here. Like this is not just like anyone getting any package. This is a big deal. And they're like, all right, let's look. And they're like, oh, okay, yes, it was misdelivered. It shows that we delivered it to this address, which is like right around the corner. And I was like, look, lady, not for nothing, but this is not the first time that a package has been misdelivered. I have personally walked a bunch of packages around the neighborhood for your UPS guy who can't seem to get it right. And she was like, well, you're on a training route. And I'm like, oh, good. Okay.
Fabulous. I love being your guinea pig. Thanks.
Yeah, like thanks for practicing on our packages. So the kid in the meantime is like, well, let's go to their door. Let's go to their door. And I'm like, so going to the neighbor who we don't know and demanding that they give us a package they may or may not have gotten could result in us getting shot. So let's not do that. And he's like furious about the whole thing. He's like, and they're keeping it, they're stealing, rah! And he's like, so mad that they haven't returned this package. And in the meantime, UPS has gone back to try to retrieve the package, but the people are like, we don't have it, we never got it, we don't know. So now we have to go back to Oculus and try to get a new one sent, explain what happened. In the meantime, like this is not a kid that deals well with disappointment. So we have been having a week. I'm sure it'll get worked out. We don't have it. Nobody has it. Nobody knows where it is. UPS is being very nice on the phone and saying things like, we will make sure this gets worked out, stuff like that. I haven't quite figured out exactly what that means yet. They've sent us back to the manufacturer to explain what happened and to say that we need them to open a package investigation. And UPS is saying that they are liable. So in the long run, he will get the thing, but it's considering he was like tracking the truck to our door, it's much longer than he expected to wait.
That's awful.
And I think it's actually good for him, but it's just been a little rough.
Right.
Good things come to those who wait.
Poor kiddo. I would be so mad. Bless his heart.
Yeah. It's a birthday present. He spent all his money on it.
Yeah, and of all the stupid things that we order, like it couldn't have been a pair of sneakers that I ordered for myself or, like misdeliver other things.
Right. Yeah. Get the kid his present.
Yeah. But anyway, so that is the story.
Okay, well, we're going to very smoothly transition into welcoming Eva. So tell us a little bit about your writing and what you write. And
Okay. I actually started writing about 5 years ago, and we moved, and I just thought, why not, right? And I started writing contemporary romance, but which was fun, and it was a good way to start my writing career. But my publicist actually suggested 2 years ago, year and a half ago, that I try writing darker romance. She thought that I would enjoy it, and that that my voice was actually probably better for a less contemporary romance. And I tried it, and I fell in love. And so
I'm just curious, when you have this conversation and she's like, I think we need to write some darker stuff.
Right.
What was your first reaction? Were you like, yes, let's do it? Or did you feel a little worried about that?
Well, she didn't it wasn't quite like that. I had this idea about writing a book. I was thinking about a series called All the President's Sons. And I was talking to her about it. And that was like the switch. And she said, well, you could make it a little darker than what you've been doing. And I think your voice would lend itself well to that. And so I was like, okay, why not? Right. And my contemporary romance already had some darker elements to it, or maybe not darker, but not cheery elements. They were not rom-com kind of, even though there's some funny moments. So it wasn't a huge transition, except now I feel like that I'm not really writing heroes anymore. I'm writing either more anti-heroes or people who straddle the line, heroes who straddle the line.
So in your mind, is that kind of the definition of darker, that the hero isn't necessarily the knight in shining armor?
Well, actually, no, that really isn't my definition. In some ways, yes. I think that dark romances, I think, are on a continuum.
For sure.
Where there are sort of the purists who like the hero to kidnap the heroine, or something like that, where they are truly... where it's hard to find something redeemable right off the bat, or maybe ever for some people in it. And then there are people who, if there are any dark elements whatsoever in the book, child molestation or past rape, it doesn't even have to be a current, anything like that, that we sort of think about as sort of an unsavory life event, right? That is considered dark. And what I feel like I do is actually write heroes or anti-heroes mainly, who are dangerous. They are not necessarily, and there are dark elements in my stories, but they're sometimes in unexpected places. They don't always belong to the hero. Sometimes they belong to a family member or a circumstance that the anti-hero and heroine find themselves in. So that's sort of where I see my writing. And the feedback that I've gotten from readers is all across the board. Readers who think that I shouldn't market my books as that it's sort of deceptive marketing to say that they're dark. And I've been pretty careful about doing that, about not doing that. And then readers who feel that they're too dark. So it's just about finding the right match.
Yeah, you can't please everybody. We always know that, right? So there's always going to be someone unhappy.
Right.
But I guess, and I should have dug around a little bit more to see what contemporary definitions of dark romance look like. In my mind, I know when Dawn and I talked about this, we kind of came upon the dark being about the sex, kind of. Am I right, Dawn? Like the BDSM aspects,
That's interesting.
more of that maybe dark romance has more kink.
But there's erotica, right? So
True.
and I think that there are some dark romances where there isn't so much kink. There's you could have like a rape scene in them.
Yeah. In my head, what you're saying makes more sense. It's more atmospheric. It's more about the setting and the situation, and maybe people die. And like in a happy-go-lucky rom-com, nobody's going to die.
Right.
Well, that's not true. I just killed somebody, but she was old.
No one important though.
Not in the same manner that I have seen Eva kill somebody. Okay,
no,
let's
not
just
at all.
put that out there. I won't do any spoilers, but I do remember us having a conversation of, so we're going to do this. Okay, that's what's going to happen. I think what you're saying too, as far as it being related to the sex, also is there's the issue of consent, and that is something I think in the darker romances, or even when you start getting into the like super dark corner romances where it gets more into some of the very taboo stuff, consent is not something that's considered, to where in a contemporary romance, that's a must-have.
Right. And I would say that I think that that's a really important point. And there are readers who don't want consent. And then there are readers who need that piece. What I have done with my books is there is consent. Some of it is dubious at times, but the heroine always ends up consenting before they have sex. And for me, that's up until this point, that's been as far as I'm willing to wade with regard to consent.
I think that's when we were talking about somebody's always going to be unhappy when consent isn't clearly delineated, especially in today's world.
Right.
I think you're going to have a lot more people who are unhappy than you do right now.
Right. I think that's absolutely true, but I do find it, because I sort of feel like I'm somewhere in the middle of dark, if you're looking at it as a continuum. And I'm actually always surprised, because I worry about that feedback, the lack of consent feedback, especially in this era. But I'm always surprised at really how many people are on the other side as well. And a lot of authors actually have stopped writing some of the very dark romances. And that is because Amazon is putting people in the dungeon for that. And
not the fun dungeon, not the dungeon you want to go hang out in.
Not the fun dungeon at all. There's no punishment there. It's all punishment. But the other thing is that it's exhausting to write it's emotionally exhausting to write a pure dark romance where you are always in the dark, so to speak, where there's very little light. And because I think even just writing in the way that I'm writing, where there is light in different places, sometimes it takes a while to get there, but it's still there are parts of the books that are emotionally just very draining. When you have bad things happen to people.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. It's funny that you say the dark, because when I think of the books of yours that I have worked on, I have like it's always night in my head, and it's almost gothic, like big old churchy buildings and like underground tunnels and
Well, because I love sort of the thriller, the suspense piece. That's part of that piece. And also, that sort of wafting incense kind of feel. That's sort of like my jam. I love that. And which is probably why my publicist said, your voice would be really good for that, because it's just something. I like dark old churches and alleyways, and
you should write paranormal.
yeah. It's interesting. I feel, I mean, I think that probably I've jumped subgenres enough for now, though.
Well, and I think you brought up a good point about that it's exhausting for the author, because for someone considering writing this, that's something they need to be aware of, because as a reader of the dark romance, you can put it down and walk away from it at any point.
Right.
And the author, you're living in that world, and as whenever you even step away from the computer, those people are still in your world and whatever, in your mind, and whatever just happened to them, and you have some really serious things happening to some people. That's something that's really hard to set aside of, okay, this really bad stuff all just happened. I'm going to go bake some cookies now. It's going to have an impact on the author's mind for a while. It's got to.
It does. And the other thing about it is that I like my characters for the most part, my main characters. And so it's very hard to take them through a journey that has, just sporadic light in it, through those pieces of the journey. And so it's painful in that way. That's really painful.
Well, in talking about liking your characters, we're going to talk about your heroes a little bit.
Okay.
So I have a personal favorite, and we'll talk about him in a minute. But when you're looking at your heroes, because some of your heroes, as you said, they're the anti-heroes. They're not the guy you're taking home to meet your mom.
Right.
And so how do you keep that line between cocky, hot, and I wouldn't put up with you in real life, but I'll sure borrow you for a couple of hours, to obsessive jerk that the reader doesn't want to hang out with?
I think that one of the things, I'll first of all start by saying that I think romance readers have a higher tolerance for heroes or anti-heroes who behave badly. In general, our tolerance for heroines is we need their behavior to be a certain way because they're just annoying, right? I mean, how many times have you heard readers say that? So I think that what I try to do is I try to humanize them. I like an alpha hero, and I love an anti-hero, and so they're easier to write if you like them. And there are like little things that you can always do. You can give them someone to take care of, whether it's a dog, whether it's, a brother, a sibling, a parent, anything where they can show that side of them. I also think it's a way, how much you give them, how soon you give it to them in the book, or how soon you show the reader will define how dark the character is. So if you give too much of the hero anti-hero's goodness away, or his vulnerability away too soon, you weaken him in a sense in terms of being an anti-hero. That's something that the reader needs to discover down the road, and they need to be surprised by it in some way, in some small way, even though they're expecting it. I think showing empathy is another way, if you can get them to show empathy. But when I start the books with the darker heroes, I like to start from the from the heroine's point of view. And the reason I do that is because I want the reader to see, to meet the antihero through the heroine's eyes. And the other reason is that I think that in these books, again, I think readers are a little less interested in heroines. We like them, but I think that the readers of these books are more interested in the antiheroes. And so to have the antihero really getting to know the heroine or talking about the heroine, I think you not only give too much away, you show his cards too soon, but I think it doesn't interest the reader. Readers who pick up these books, they want the bad boy. What I usually do also, or what I've done, is while the heroine often describes someone that she doesn't care for, that's who she's showing the reader, she's not afraid of him. Even though he might be dangerous and she's concerned about some of the things that he does in the books that I've written so far, at least, the heroine is not afraid for herself, really. She can be afraid for someone else. She can be afraid of the way he'll behave because she doesn't necessarily trust that, but she's not afraid of her own well-being. So
that makes sense. Yeah. And I think that's a pretty fine line to walk, because you have to create someone who maybe is unpredictable and yet build reader trust that he's not going to be so unpredictable that he's going to do something to make us hate him, really, or to make the heroine unable to accept him in the future.
Right. Because what happens is that reader that you're describing is one type of more dangerous, who likes sort of the dangerous antihero. But there's also the other reader who wants him to really push the boundaries and maybe even cross them. So it's hard to satisfy both of those types of readers. Readers who don't like it at all, obviously, just don't like the books, or you don't like the genre. But there is really a mixture there of people, different with contemporary readers. Although I think there are contemporary readers who like more sex, for example, and some who like less sex. And so that's also a tough balance. This is a little different in terms of sort of pushing boundaries.
Well, so when you write, because we had this conversation with Melanie Harlow, and she said that when she sits down to write a book, she's thinking about one reader who is between 35 and 50, has a couple kids, has some college education, who lives in the Midwest, or she gave us a lot of details just because she knows who her readers are. And she said, I write my book for her. And I always think about, how will she like this? Would she want my heroine to do that? Will she like it if the hero does this? So if you're kind of trying to satisfy both groups of readers, do you think about them in those terms? Like, do you aim it at one in particular and just hope the other ones kind of are okay with it? Or how do you do that?
Nope, I let the characters drive the story. And the time that I think about the readers is really when it's done, when I'm really going through the book later and I think about, is this going to be too hard for someone to read? And then that's, or is this really consent? Have I crossed a line? You know, those sorts of things. And then I think more about it in terms of that. And some of it I might just address in a note to the reader that falls at the beginning of the book or in a blurb. There are two schools of thought, right, with authors that authors seem to have, which is that either there are trigger warnings or there aren't. And I was a social worker at one time in my life, and I lean toward trigger warnings, or at least warn people that there are dark elements. I'm never specific about that. I don't say someone was raped in this book, but I encourage people. I encourage readers to contact me if they have any concerns before they read the book. I once wrote a book where a baby died in the book, and it was one of my contemporary romances, hence the dark element in my contemporary romances. And it didn't matter that I said it in the blurb. Readers contacted me totally freaked out about it. And some contacted me saying, I can't believe it really happened. Even though I knew it was going to happen, I can't believe you did it. And not even in a bad way. I mean, some people were annoyed. It's actually my best loved book, which is kind of fascinating. But it's even if you put the trigger warnings in, I think that readers don't always, they think it's somehow going to be different, or that maybe they don't embrace them in the same way. So I'm not specific. I just say, there are dark elements, and please contact me if you have any concern. So.
Fair enough.
So do you have any issues with that as far as like your personal life, like people who read the book and are reading like some of the, like I'm thinking of the duet from the beginning, some of the really kind of dark stuff, and then you have your neighbor who comes out to get their mail and is kind of looking at you different as they're walking back in the house, or?
No, I'm pretty careful about, keeping what I do. I live in a really small town, so I'm really very careful about kind of separating them. But the story that I love is that my aunts, my father was the youngest of 11 kids, so his older sisters are in their 80s and 90s, and one of my aunts wanted to read, she had read my contemporary romances, and she wanted to read the duet. And I was like, yeah, I don't think so. So I kept dragging my feet, and she got one of my cousins to order it for her. And I was just totally, but she thought it was totally fine, which was kind of good. She was on board with it. She did say that my father alive, he would be like, shaking his head, he would know about it. But no, I haven't. I have, in terms of, there are some people I know who read the books, who I was a little nervous were reading them, but they're totally fine with it. My children, on the other hand, my sons are like, they have not read them, but I understand that one of them, his girlfriend reads passages to him when she wants to annoy him.
That is awesome.
Yeah. And we don't discuss that though.
Oh, that's funny. My uncle, well, my husband's uncle, who, I've known for 20 years, reads my books, which I find really funny. And I just wish that we could leave it at that, but he wants to talk to me about them.
Of course.
He always says stuff like, I really like the sex part. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about that. Oh my God.
Oh,
That's so funny.
There's so many things wrong with that sentence right there that I don't even know where to start, like unpacking it.
Well, if you were in any other way creepy, it would be a problem. But he's just like the most like jovial, happy. I love this guy. So I'm just kind of like, no, like we'll just put that over there. Let's have more wine.
No, I mean, and I think everyone, it doesn't matter whether you write contemporary or dark romance or erotica. I think that there are always people who you rather not have the discussion with.
For sure.
Yeah. So.
Well, and you have the people who wonder what's going on in your house, like, or what you've experienced, especially with some of the stuff that you write about with some of your characters' wounds from the past and some of these terrible things they've been through. There's always those people who are like, that's quite an imagination you got there.
Yeah, actually, that's funny. That's what my aunt said. You know, I sort of joke around and say, well, this isn't a biography, or an autobiography. You know, it's just, yes, it's my imagination gone wild. And, yeah, and I guess, you know, I think throughout my life, when I practiced law, I practiced child abuse and neglect and domestic violence. And when I was doing social work, I was focused on domestic violence issues and policy issues. And so my mind has always sort of been immersed in sort of a darker side of life. And while certainly these are not stories that are, they're not stories that anyone has lived. I mean, except in my imagination. I think sort of the feelings that I can take from, you know, what it feels like to have someone tell you a story that, you know, makes your heart race or makes you really nervous. And even for myself, you know, when I was working in a domestic violence agency, there was one day when someone had come in, who was really nervous, and her abuser was a police officer, and the local police had been following her. This is where I used to live, not here, but and harassing her a bit because they were her husband's friends, and she was nervous. She had been followed to the agency that day, and when I left, aside from hearing her story, but when I left that day, I was really careful all the way. Dark out already. I was really careful. I kept looking in my rear view mirror, and I was so relieved when my garage door shut behind me. So I just kind of draw on some of those feelings when I'm thinking about, you know, a heroine who might be in a dangerous situation, or who might be worried for her life in some way.
Yeah.
I think that's a great tip for authors who are considering writing this kind of thing. If you don't have to have experienced it,
Right.
You don't have to even know anybody who experienced it, but you can read the news story or watch the movie or whatever, and take how that makes you feel there and amplify it into your character.
Right. How does it make you feel? That sort of that feeling. And we do that in general, right? I think that even when you get to sort of the grand gesture, right? I mean, often authors think about their own experiences, not their own specific experiences, but just the way it felt to maybe have someone who did something nice for you, or that sort of thing, right? We draw on our own feelings all the time, because they're feelings that we can, that are universal in a lot of ways, and that readers can embrace and empathize with.
I think that's true no matter what you're writing.
Right.
Everything you're going to produce is going to be a little piece of you, whether it's something you've experienced, something you felt, something you saw.
Right.
It's inevitable. Otherwise, it would be impossible to write.
Right.
So do you ever worry about, with some of these topics, the idea of, quote, getting it wrong, that you're going to, if you're addressing some of these things that obviously you haven't experienced firsthand and hopefully haven't seen firsthand, do you worry like some reader is going to be sending you an email of, that's not how that works at all, this isn't, you know, you didn't portray that relationship well, or you didn't show those emotions well? Is that ever a concern?
Yes, I try to be really careful about that, and really respectful of it. And and often what I do, like in terms of, I don't live a BDSM lifestyle, even though I write kink in my books. But I've talked to submissives, and I've talked to dominants, and aside from whatever research I've done, I've actually tried to talk to people so that I understand more than just sort of the shallow piece, like how does it feel, kind of thing. And what I found are people are pretty generous in terms of sharing information, as long as they feel that you're trustworthy and that you're trying to do the right thing. So I think that is one of the things that I do worry about is, I do worry a little bit about normalizing some of the dubious consent or some of those things. And even though I don't really think it's an author's responsibility, but it is something that I do concern myself with.
That makes sense. And I agree with you completely that it's not the author's responsibility, but there's the line between where is it the taboo romance and where does it become abuse, right. I think is a consideration there sometimes.
Right. And I think that we could say that taboo romance by most standards has some real elements of abuse. I mean, I think that some of it, not all of it, but I think that, in situations where you have a minor who is a young minor, it's hard to call it something else. I'm not saying that people shouldn't read it or that authors shouldn't write it, but I do think that there are some elements of abuse. But I also think that we have the right as women to have our own, or readers in general, but most romance readers are women, that we have the right to have have whatever fantasies we want. We have a right to write about them, but we have a right to read them. And even if they are, cross some boundaries, while there are people who enjoy reading about an anti-hero raping a heroine, they would never want that for themselves or for anyone else. But it's something that is interesting or tittillating to them, or makes their lady parts tingle. And I think that we have, and I think that's okay. I think that's totally okay. I think that we're very hard on each other as women, and I certainly have witnessed and even been part of this, just a discussion between authors who feel differently or are on different sides of this. And I always come down on the side that it never ends well for us when someone tells us what it is that we should read or write or do or be aroused by. So that's, because I might not read it or write it, it certainly, I'm not in a position to judge.
I think that's maybe a good point to wrap up on. People should be able to find what they want to read and be allowed to read it without judgment, and we should write what we feel we want to write. Hopefully Amazon will not get too cracky downy on, that's a new word, on putting people in the non-fun dungeon for things that don't meet their standards. Are other retailers equally, what's the word, limiting?
I think Barnes and Nobles is, and occasionally I hear something about Apple. Amazon tends, most people have Amazon is their biggest retailer, not all of them, but for many people. And many readers purchase on Amazon. So I think you run into a lot more trouble on Amazon, truthfully. But I do occasionally hear things from about other retailers as well, in terms of covers.
Yeah.
content as much as covers.
No, because I know Amazon does do they've really begun focusing more on quality. And so I'm guessing there's some kind of a bot that goes through pages and looks for specific things.
Right.
I don't know whether they're flagging specific types of content or anything like that.
I don't know. I mean, I think your blurbs and your keywords can get you into trouble, or your cover. Those tend to be the things, or a reader reporting you.
Right.
That would be another way. Someone who reads something, occasionally books get put into categories where they shouldn't be put into, and it's not always authors who manage that. And I think that readers can become offended and report books.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, and if we're going to talk about covers for just a second, we have to talk about, everybody should just go look up your covers and just stare at them for a little bit.
They are pretty.
You need to just go see for yourself if you think Amazon should be upset about these covers or not, because I wasn't the least bit
Amazon's not upset
about
about your covers, are they?
No, I haven't actually had try.
Oh, okay.
I have a cover right now for a book that's coming in on Tuesday, where there is a cover that I would not put up on Amazon, even though I'm using it in party, takeovers and stuff. The cover artist just used two, one with a shadow and one without.
Okay. And so you have a book coming out Tuesday. Can you tell us just a quick little bit about it and how we can find it?
You can find it on Amazon. It's actually on pre-order right now at a pre-order price. And it's called Decadent. And it is the fourth book in the Charleston series, and probably the final book, although I suppose I could revisit them in some ways. I have already started getting little notes from ARC readers who have been giving me ideas for more stories in that series. They would like me to write, but I think it's time to move on. So.
All right. So Decadent comes out on Tuesday. If you want to find out what we've been talking about in terms of the way Eva Charles writes dark romance, and readers can pick that book up even if they haven't read the other books in the series, right?
It's a standalone, although what I would say, what I would caution people about is that you can, but there are some spoilers in that book from the earlier books. So if you plan on reading the earlier books, you probably should do that first.
Yeah, start with Depraved.
Right.
And then Delivered. And then my favorite, which is Bound, because Smith is my man.
Smith is my favorite hero too.
Smith is my man.
He's more of a traditional hero.
Maybe that's why.
Yes.
I like a beta hero myself.
Yeah.
Now don't get me wrong. JD, who is in the first two and Depraved and Delivered, he's hot. But he's the one that I would only put up with him for a little bit of time, but he's good. But Smith has my heart. And then when you get to Decadent, first of all, you need to look at the unedited cover. But after that, like if Smith was out of town, I'd definitely take gray. I'd be flexible that way. That's the list of Dawn's preferences on the heroes here.
Now we know.
Yes, now you know.
Well, maybe we can arrange for you to meet cute a hero next. No, that was horrible. We're going to talk about meet cutes next week.
Yes, next week we're going to.
That was like a flitting. Yeah, I wish I could just reel it backwards, but it's too late now. So.
Yes, next week we are talking about meet cutes, and it's going to be probably the complete opposite of what we've been talking about today, but it'll be fun. We're going to talk about how to make them not cliche.
Right.
Right.
You have to have a meet in every romance, but I guess in a dark romance, it wouldn't be a meet cute. It would be like a meet serious, or I don't know. I'm not even drinking.
You have to say it in that voice.
Yes, there's a meet everywhere, right?
Meet everywhere.
All right.
Okay. Well, and where can the readers find you? I know you said your book's on Amazon, but do you also have a website?
I have a website, evacharles.com, and you can find me on really on Facebook and Instagram more than Twitter. And I always answer emails. And yes, I can be found in all the usual places, all the usual hangouts.
Excellent. Well, thank you for hanging out with us today. This was very fun.
Thank you for having me.
Any parting shots, anyone?
No, I think we've covered everything today. This was fun, though.
It was fun. It was nice finally getting to put a face to the name.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
great.
And thank you for our people who popped up and commented. We appreciate you as well.
Yes, and we'll see you back here next week for Meet Cute. We'll have a better name for it.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Bye, guys.